Woke up quick at about noon.
Appreciate you downloading, streaming, listening, and watching another episode here of the podcast with Damien Barling, presented by Vibe Health Bar, Sacramento's premier superfood cafe, where you can get the plant-based, loaded protein smoothie. PB Dream, you can get their amazing drip coffee, and you can get the best green juice ever created. Of course, I'm talking about the birthday suit that's available in Folsom, East Sac, and Oak Park. Vibe Health Bar, where busy people like you go to achieve vibrant health. After a slow Monday in the National Basketball Association, we had a very busy Tuesday. Of course, we're going to cover all of that for you. We've got the Kings and the Pelicans on national television tonight. We'll preview that since the national side of it, ESPN side of it, they've got the Zion Williamson aspect. They've got that covered pretty well. We'll cover the game in its totality. We'll cover it for the Sacramento Kings, and we'll get you ready for that game here in just a few minutes. More drama from the NFL Players Association and some potential rule changes coming your way here in the NFL this year. But we'll start with, we're all Orlando Magic fans, right? If you're a Sacramento Kings fan, you were definitely an Orlando Magic fan last night, and the Magic bench scored a season-high 65 points. They outscored the Grizzlies bench 65-36. Orlando goes on to beat Memphis. They have now won 3 straight road games. That's their longest such streak of the season. And that means the winner of tonight's game, the winner of the Kings and the Pelicans, will find themselves just 3 games back from the 8th spot in the Western Conference. Remember the Western Conference playoff hunt. Remember, the Pelicans played the Grizzlies twice. Remember, this is the first of 2 matchups with the Sacramento Kings over the last 18 games here. So there are some pretty big stakes. And, we talked about this earlier in the week, and, we'll talk about it as we move forward. This is, the next in line of biggest games of the season for the Sacramento Kings. The Sacramento Kings got a whole lot of biggest games of the seasons coming up. And as long as they win, that'll continue. They lose tonight, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. But knowing that they play New Orleans again, knowing that New Orleans has an opportunity to not only help their cause, but to help everybody else's cause as well by beating the Grizzlies a couple of times. Those are all good things for the Kings. Those are all good things for the Pelicans, quite honestly. Those are all good things for the Portland Trailblazers, the San Antonio Spurs. Those are pretty much good for everybody. Before we get to the Kings and the Pelicans, we'll touch on a couple of other notes that happened in the National Basketball Association. Yesterday, the Rockets snapped a 4-game losing streak behind 37 points from James Harden, 11 of 19 from the field. It snapped a streak of 5 straight games where Harden was shooting below 40%. The Rockets are 16-1 this season when James Harden shoots above 50%. Russell Westbrook had his 34th straight 20-point game, tying James Harden for the longest streak by any player this season and tying the 3rd longest streak in Rockets history. We talked about the Grizzlies. How about the Spurs? Well, the Spurs won yesterday. They avoided getting swept by the Dallas Mavericks for the first time in team history. Luka, he had 38 points, giving him 130 points against the Spurs this season. That's tied for the 3rd most points in a season against the Spurs under Greg Popovich. And you can file that under the category of there is a stat for everything. Celtics, that was a hell of a game yesterday between the Celtics and the Indiana Pacers. The Celtics, they won their 4th straight road game. They beat the Pacers 114-111. Jason Tatum had his 14th 30th point game this season. He only had one 30-point game in his first 2 seasons combined. Victor Oladipo looked great last night. He had a season-high 27 points in the Pacers loss. But most importantly for the Boston Celtics, they have clinched a playoff position. So along with the Toronto Raptors, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Los Angeles Lakers, and I think that's it. They have all clinched playoff spots right now. Speaking of the Lakers, the Nets were a 12-point underdog last night. They managed to go on to beat the Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron James missed a potential game-tying layup with about 11 seconds left. That's noteworthy because LeBron James, that would have been his, had the layup gone in, it would have been his 21st 30-point game of the season. The Lakers, they won the first 20 such games. They were 20-0 when LeBron James had a 30-point game this season. But the layup didn't fall. Neither did Anthony Davis's potential game-winning three. So the Nets survived. The new-look Nets, I guess. I think Jacques Vaughn, I don't know if he's going to be their guy moving forward. J.B. Bickerstaff got a contract extension yesterday. There's a couple of Cleveland Cavalier notes here, and I think we got a week and a half before I think it's 2 weeks before the Kings play the Cavs in Cleveland. And Cleveland city officials were, I guess they're urging for the Cavs to play in an empty arena. And it's impossible now to not have a sports podcast or have a sports talk show or, watch Sports Center or whatever your favorite, platform to get sports news from without hearing about the coronavirus. It's pretty much impossible to go anywhere without hearing about the coronavirus because it's all intertwined now. That virus and the sports world, they're very much intertwined because we're talking about quarantines. We're talking about public settings. We're talking about an airborne illness. We're talking about a contact-to-contact illness. Now we've got conferences, as most of you are aware. The MAC conference, UC Davis men and women, they've been affected. Their conference title games or their conference championships, they're not going to be played in front of fans. And that's a, Mark Emmert, who's just the shadiest, most crooked individual in the world. Well, not in the world because, FIFA does still exist, and so does the IOC. But he runs the NCAA. He's the president of the NCAA. And he was like, well, these conferences, they make their own decision on what they want to do and how they want to do it and if they want to cancel games or if they want to play in empty arenas or whatever they want to do. That is up to them. That has nothing to do with us. Despite the fact I'm the president of the NCAA. What you're not going to hear is the NCAA tournament being canceled. And that's obviously of note because, specifically, that was the wrong way of putting it. Obviously, it's not going to be canceled. What you're not going to hear is that the NCAA tournament is going to be played in an empty arena. And the reason you're not going to hear that is because money talks in the NCAA. And there's way too much money on the line for those games to be played in an empty arena. The Golden One Center's been sold out for weeks. But Golden One Center's probably been sold out for months for the first couple of sessions of the NCAA tournament. You think the NCAA is going to give that back? I don't think so. But they're allowing the conferences, the individual conferences, to make these decisions because it helps the NCAA save face. It helps them say, well, we were responsible here and we were responsible here. There's a big conference call today with the NBA owners. And Adrian Wojnarowski has been tweeting about this for several days. Apparently there was a call with general managers. Now there's a call with owners, and they're all trying to figure out, they're all coming up with, what you might call a disaster plan. What is the worst case scenario? If the worst case scenario happens and an infection just continues to spread, how do we handle this? They've kind of, they being the NBA and not just the NBA, all Major League Baseball was a part of the statement, the NHL, Major League Soccer. They've, kind of mini quarantined the media. Okay. That's no contact with players and only essential personnel and essential team personnel. And so you're doing your best to minimize contact with players. What you're doing is you're trying to minimize the ability for a player to get sick, and thus one player gets sick, two players get sick, a locker room gets sick, and suddenly you don't have a game, and you're losing the revenue from a game. Imagine if someone on the Sacramento Kings were sick or someone on the New Orleans Pelicans were sick, and we find out at 5 o'clock, Pacific Standard Time, and ESPN loses that game tonight. And they've got nothing to put in the play in its place, or there's a million different what ifs, right? That's what these conference calls are all about. The what if scenarios. There was one that I read this morning from Woj tweeted it that one of the things that's going to be discussed is potentially sending games to cities that have so far been unaffected by the coronavirus. And I couldn't help but think what a terrible, terrible idea that is. Because there's no test for the virus yet, right? So, you could have someone who feels maybe like mildly under the weather. Maybe it's one of the players. Maybe it's a media relations guy, public relations guy. Maybe it's a coach. And you're sending a group of players, sorry, let me rephrase that. You're sending a group of people from an infected area to an uninfected area. Does anyone else see the flaw in that? Does anybody else see the potential disaster from that plan? Now, I don't know that this is the plan that's actually on the table. I know Woj tweeted about it being a possibility. And this is such a difficult thing to talk about. Like it's a difficult thing to approach because we really don't have a lot of information on this virus other than it spreads really, really easily. And that seems to be the concern. And you would think based on some of the texts that I get on a day-to-day, like I've got nurses texting me, telling me what's going on in hospitals and how these types of things are happening, which is awesome. And then you got some guy who read an article on the news and he's the expert and he's telling me how I'm wrong about, A, B, C, and D. All I'm doing, I'm trying to absorb as much information on this as you guys are. So what the NBA decides, I guess we'll all find out together. But the idea of taking a group of people who have been in a so-called affected area and having them go play a basketball game in an uninfected area, that just does not seem like the soundest strategy for me. But again, this is something we'll all figure out together. This is something that we'll all find out together. I do think somewhere in the United States, sometime in the month of March, we're going to see a game played in an empty arena. I think we're going to see an NBA game played in an empty arena. And I don't know if that's going to be in New York or Brooklyn. I don't know if that's going to be in Sacramento or San Francisco. I know, wasn't there a report yesterday that San Francisco city officials have urged the Warriors, who were eliminated from the playoffs? That has nothing to do with the coronavirus, but it is noteworthy as they've been to the NBA Finals 5 times, and I don't know when I'm going to work the Warriors into the conversation again. So I'll just mention, in addition to what I'm about to say, they were eliminated from the playoffs yesterday, or playoff contention, I should say. But didn't San Francisco city officials say they wanted the Warriors, they didn't want gatherings at the Chase Center? And the Warriors were like, we ain't going to do that, bro. We're going to go ahead and play our games. And we're going to go ahead and play in front of our audience. I may have misread that article. That's how it read to me. If I misread that, please forgive me. But I know that story, that note is out there. So, again, this is something that we'll just all watch together. Part of me, Friday when that memo went out, I very much thought tonight's nationally televised game was going to be played in front of an empty arena. I thought tonight's PelicansKings game was going to be played in front of an empty arena. But, here we are, day of game, depending on when you're listening to this, and that doesn't appear to be the case. Both teams, obviously, as we transition to tonight's game, both teams are very much in the hunt for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. According to ESPN's Basketball Power Index, the Pelicans have a 35% chance to get the 8th seed, right behind the Memphis Grizzlies. They're 39%. Remember, no matter how the schedule shakes out for the New Orleans Pelicans, no matter how well the Sacramento Kings have played of late, it ultimately boils down to, are the Memphis Grizzlies going to lose enough games for one of these two teams, or perhaps the Spurs, or perhaps the Trailblazers to take advantage of it? Despite the fact that the Pelicans and the Kings have the same exact record right now, the Pelicans, who we just mentioned, have a 35% chance of making the playoffs. The Kings, according to ESPN's Basketball Power Index, only have a 12% chance of making the playoffs. Now, that has a lot to do with, the so-called strength of schedule and perhaps the Zion Williamson factor. And why not, man? He's been pretty good. He'll be playing in his 20th game of the season tonight Here are a couple of notable stats on Zion Williamson that you can use heading into tonight's game. He's averaging 23.6 points per game. The last player with a higher scoring average through his first 20 games was Michael Jeffrey Jordan. So there you have it. We were talking about it yesterday. Greatest players of all time. It is now obviously Michael Jordan, Zion Williamson. That's how stats work. Zion Williamson has 16 20-point games. That's tied with Michael Jordan and Terry Cummings for the most 20-point games through 20 career games since the 1976-77 merger. So I take that back. It is now Michael Jordan, Terry Cummings, then Zion Williamson, because that's how stats work. Excuse me. Zion Williamson is shooting 58.9% over these 15 games. We mentioned the 23.6 points per game that he is averaging. He is only playing 29.7 minutes per game. That's currently the highest scoring average by a player who has averaged less than 30 minutes per game in an NBA season. In terms of points in the paint, Zion is averaging 17.3 points per game. That is second in the NBA behind Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is averaging 17.5. When Zion Williamson is out on the floor, the Pelicans have outscored their opponents by 6 points. Another thing of note as it pertains to Zion Williamson, and before we transition to the Kings side of this, particularly Buddy Hield, the play of Lonzo Ball since Zion Williamson's debut has been nothing short of phenomenal. Lonzo was averaging 39% from the field, 36% from three, and 6.3 assists per game. His plus minus, minus 2.3. That was prior to January 22nd. That was prior to Zion Williamson's debut. Since January 22nd, Lonzo Ball's field goal percentage has gone up to 46%. His three-point percentage has gone up to 43%. His assists per game have gone up to 8.4, and his plus minus has gone up to plus 5.6. Another interesting note as it pertains to Lonzo Ball is he's improved his three-point shooting every season he has been in the NBA. He was 30.5 his rookie year. He was 32.9 last season, and he is 38.3 so far this season. So those are a couple of notes on the Kings' opponent tonight. Those are a couple of notes on Lonzo Ball, Zion Williamson, and the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, it'll be a major storyline in tonight's game because the Kings don't get many national televised games, and this is a time in which the team is relatively close to that 8th spot in the Western Conference playoffs. They're close enough to make it a conversation, with 18 games left. And you're going to hear tonight about the Kings having the longest playoff drought in the NBA. They actually have the 4th longest in all of sports. Doug Christie's Seattle Mariners, they're going on 18 seasons. The Cleveland Browns, they're going on 17. And the Miami Marlins are going on 16. You've got Sacramento there with 13. You've got the San Diego Padres with 13. The second longest NBA drought belongs to the Phoenix Suns at 9. They've had one owner, and you know my rule. You get to 10 years without making the playoffs, got to sell the team. The story, and it's a polarizing story, is Buddy Hield. And again, it'll be a topic of conversation tonight with the national broadcast team on ESPN. Buddy's move to the bench, it was about at the same time Zion Williamson returned. So there's a lot of, before and after stats. Zion Williamson debuted with the New Orleans Pelicans on January 22nd. Buddy Hield and Bogdan Bogdanovic switched places for all intents and purposes in the lineup on January 24th. So the before and after numbers for both teams to these kind of season-shifting moves here are pretty interesting. Of course, when you can use numbers to make any kind of argument you want. Ken Rudolph once told me you could do anything with numbers. Well, that's true. You could make it's amazing. I posted the numbers I'm about to give you on Twitter yesterday. I posted them without any sort of commentary. Just posted them. Said, here's Buddy's numbers as a starter. Here's Buddy's numbers as a reserve. That's it. I didn't say, see, Luke is right. I didn't say, hey, there needs to be content. Just provided the numbers. And people took those numbers, and you use those numbers to form or to back up whatever your argument is. You can use those arguments to say, well, Luke Walton is a terrible coach. The reason Buddy was better coming off the bench is, one, De'Aaron was hurt for like 22 of those games. They didn't run it right. They tried to get De'Aaron off the ball, so they made a million different arguments as to why those numbers are skewed and he's better off the bench. Then the people who think, well, Buddy needs to be on the bench. Look at the numbers. There are the numbers. Look, his field goal percentage went up. His three-point percentage went up. For whatever reason, his free throw percentage skyrocketed and the Kings are winning more games. See, I told you. All you got to do is look at the numbers, but you could look at the numbers. Everybody looks at numbers with their skewed slant. Like we already have opinions on something. We already feel like we know the answer. Whatever the question is, if the question is, are the Sacramento Kings better without Buddy Hield in the starting lineup? We feel like we know the answer. And we use those numbers to back that up. No matter what side of the fence we're on, we can use those numbers. Here are the numbers. Before January 4th, Sacramento Kings 15-29. They were scoring 106.8 points per game. And Buddy was shooting 42% from field goal percentage, 36% from three, and 82% from the free throw line. Okay? Those are the before January 24th numbers. Those are the numbers with Buddy Hield as a starter. There is no mention of the amount of time De'Aaron Fox missed, which I believe is 22 games. We could pretty much just write Marvin Bagley off because he's missed. How many games have the Kings played? 60-something. He's missed like 51 of them. We just write him off completely from the equation. Didn't factor in Rashawn Holmes. Just posted those numbers. That's it. Since January 24th, when Bogdan Bogdanovic was inserted into the starting lineup and Buddy Hield was moved to the bench, the Kings are 13-7. They score 113.9 points per game. Buddy Hield's field goal percentage has gone up to 47%. His three-point percentage has gone up to 48%. And his free throw percentage has gone up to 97%. So that's an increase in those three percentages of +6, +12, and for some reason, +17. So what does it mean? I don't know. Those are just the numbers. Does it mean Buddy's better coming off the bench? The numbers say so. Does it mean that the Kings are better with Buddy coming off the bench? The numbers say so. I personally think the Kings are better when De'Aaron is incredibly aggressive. I think the Kings are better when Buddy Hield doesn't try to create shots. I think the Kings are better when you have Rashawn Holmes in the lineup. When you have that intensity there. When you have that passion there. I'm not saying that Buddy's not passionate. I'm not saying that De'Aaron's not passionate or anybody else in the Sacramento Kings uniform isn't passionate. But it's palpable when Rashawn Holmes is out there. Like, you know it right away, and the crowd is just waiting for him to block a shot, get a dunk, make a play, let out that roar. Like, the crowd is waiting for it on a night-to-night basis. It's a different type of intensity that only Rashawn Holmes has. I don't know. I think I don't think there are very many players like Rashawn Holmes in the entire league. There certainly aren't any others on the Sacramento Kings roster. At the time of, and we use the term benching, like Buddy was benched. Like, okay, I wouldn't call it Buddy's benching. I wouldn't say Buddy Hield was benched. He still plays a lot of minutes per game. He still plays well into the 20s, borderline 30 minutes a game. That's far from a benching. A benching is when you're a starter and suddenly you don't play. Or benching is when you're a starter and maybe you're playing 5 to 10 minutes after that. Then you got benched. Your ass got sat down. But he just changed to a different role on the team. On January 24th, the Kings were 14 games under 500. As we just mentioned, they were 15-29. They were in the midst of a 6-game losing streak. They were 14th in the Western Conference, and they had a 0.4% chance of making the playoffs. Perhaps the only thing about all of these stats that made me laugh is all of those numbers I just gave you. You know how far out of the 8th spot they were? Again, they were 14th. They were 12 games under 500. The Memphis Grizzlies they were still in the 8th spot. You know how far back the Kings were? On that day, January 24th, when this switch was made? 5 games. To like 3.5 now. So all of that said, they're 13-7. All of that said, Buddy's numbers have gone up. All of that said, they've gained a game and a half. Now, of course, that's, we've talked about the improvement of the New Orleans Pelicans. That has played a factor. And, the Grizzlies have had a couple of good runs here during the season. Those are things that all play factors in where the Sacramento Kings are at. I just think it's funny. Buddy Hield is averaging on the as a player coming off the bench, he is averaging 19.4 points per game. That's the second highest scoring average by a player who has played at least 5 games off the bench. Only Dennis Schroeder has averaged more points per game when coming off of the bench than Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield averages 19.4, as we just noted. Dennis Schroeder, 19.9. Marvin Bagley has missed 51 games this season. I just mentioned that a moment ago. That will be brought up tonight on the broadcast as well. The Kings have 2-11 when Bagley plays. 2-11. And we got kind of a non-update yesterday. Like, oh, he's going to be reevaluated. We don't really have anything to say now. And then I didn't see the original report. But I saw, or the original article or wherever it came from, but I saw it posted on Twitter. Did someone, and if you guys could clarify this for me, it'd be fantastic, because obviously we know how dangerous me trying to type something is while we're talking. But I saw on Twitter, did the Kings say they weren't sure he would be inserted into the lineup if he was healthy? And I saw like a clip of an article, like a screenshotted cropped clip, but I didn't know what the origins of it were, like or where it came from. I didn't know if that came from the Athletic or the B or the soon-to-be Kings Herald. I didn't know where it came from, so I should have followed up and gotten the context on that. It just stuck in the back of my mind as I started to look up notes here for tonight's game against the New Orleans Pelicans. I found this note in my booklet that said, Marvin Bagley had missed 51 games. And I remember, I kind of remembered glancing at that at some point during the day. And I mean, I don't believe that. I'm with that. If the Kings are in the hunt, we just said it right there, 2-11. I don't think you have to come out and say, hey, he's just going to sit this season. I don't think you have to do that. But, maybe in the third week of evaluation, maybe because, we're going to wait another week. You know what? We're going to evaluate him in 2 weeks. And then by that point, there's like a week left in the season. It's like, wouldn't really be beneficial to bring him back. But we'll see. Because I don't think the Kings are going to be mathematically eliminated, barring a complete collapse. I don't think the Kings, if they get eliminated, sorry, I didn't mean to be, the downer there. If they get eliminated from playoff contention, I don't think it's going to be late until I think we're probably talking in the final week. Obviously, tonight's game is going to go a long way to determine that, whether they're going to be eliminated sooner rather than later, or they're going to make a serious push for the 8th spot. But in addition to beating the Pelicans and perhaps beating the Pelicans twice, the ideal scenario is probably the Kings beating the Pelicans twice and the Pelicans beating the Grizzlies twice. That's a really hot take on my part, isn't it? You want the Kings to win and the Grizzlies to lose. That's how you're going to make the playoffs. Don't pay me the big bucks for no reasons, folks. Don't pay me the big bucks for no reasons. If you want to pay me big bucks, you can go to Patreon. Patreon is a fantastic thing. What you could do is you could pay me right? Just as like a tip. You could pay me for stuff that I already do for free. Because the idea with Patreon was, you do something, you give everybody a service, and then you create bonus services for your Patreon. So I was like, okay, I've got a few ideas for bonus services. Maybe I'll do a Kings podcast. Yeah. I do that for Hoopball. So that's free for you. Oh, maybe we'll do watch-along parties with Kings games. Like, that'd be fun. That'd be different. Yep. That's the Hot Mic app. So I'm really good at this Patreon thing. But if you want to join Patreon Nation, which is like 5 deep, and God bless those 5 people who remembered, the one time I brought up Patreon like 6 months ago and have continued to donate. I love each and every single one of you for it. It actually does go to help paying the bills for hosting these multiple different podcasts. So I do appreciate it. Please don't think it's for nothing. Even if it's $1, $2, $3, $4, that stuff goes a long, long way when many of you do it, and it helps pay for, hosting podcasts and different things like that. So greatly appreciate that. And you know who else pays us the big bucks here? Sky Naturals CBD. And they reward you by being loyal to them by giving you 15% off. All you got to do is use the promo code in the game. If you have yet to try out Sky Naturals CBD, if you've been looking to dip into the CBD market a little bit, Sky Naturals is the one you need to go to. I can speak from experience. Many, many, many of you can speak from experience as well. The topical balm is a fantastic addition to your training. It's a fantastic addition to being old. It's a fantastic addition to just the aches and pains. You don't need the super alcohol smelling stuff that you get at Walgreens or Rite Aid or the CVS anymore. CBD is a very natural, very healthy product. They have the tincture, the hemp oil extracts that you just put the drops under your tongue, leave them there for 30 seconds. I love that. I use that every night before I go to bed. I use the melatonin CBD for a little while as well. That's a great addition. I finally got the treats for my dogs to give them on, particularly my older lab, Smoothie. I give her dog treats before we get in the car for a long ride. Settles her right down, takes away some of her anxiety. And you can get all of this stuff with 15% off. Use the promo code in the game. And again, it is not 15% off of your first order. It is 15% off of every order. So use the promo code in the game at SkyNaturalsCBD.com. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. Got to be honest, haven't quite gotten the hang of this thing yet. Trying to get used to just talking in front of this, camera and just having this thing rolling. I'm trying to, I've got copyright things you got to navigate. I know there's like a sweet spot when you can play highlights and you don't get flagged by the NFL or you don't get flagged by the NBA. You got to be careful when you play music, all sorts of different things. So I'm still trying to navigate that. There's a bit of a learning curve, but I know some of you have checked out the podcast online. I know some of you have checked the podcast out on YouTube, I should say. So I greatly appreciate that. And thank you to those who watch live when that thing posts every single day. Again, greatly appreciate all the support that you have shown this podcast since way back in June. I'm going to be hosting a podcast forever, folks. I think I'm okay with that. In the March 11th edition of Why the NFLPA is the Absolute Worst in Sports, there's this story. Apparently, the NFL Players Association wouldn't allow some members of their union to change their vote. Oh, wait a minute. Why would they want to change their vote? Well, apparently, there was some new information put out. Really? New information came to light that has prompted people within the union to ask the Players Association to be able to change their vote. Now, to be completely fair, we don't know if those players want to change their vote from yes to no or from no to yes. We don't really know the context behind what this alleged or what this need for like a revote took. All we know is that the NFL Players Association said, no, you cannot change your vote. You cannot recast your vote. Okay. Interesting. More interesting to me, though, wasn't the fact that the NFL Players Association said, no, you can't change your vote. The more interesting thing to me is that members of the union actually wanted to change their vote. And I'm going to read a line from you here from Mike Florio's Pro Football Talk. Per a source with knowledge of the situation, one group of representatives wanted to give players a chance to change their votes because of the new information that has emerged since the initial burst of votes. Another group believed that players are responsible for getting whatever information they need to vote, and if they voted based on the information they had when days remained to cast a ballot, they should be held to those votes. Okay. There's one particular line I want to go back to here. One group of representatives wanted to give players a chance to change their votes because of the new information that has emerged since the initial burst of votes. What new information? It was a 476-something page document that was sent to the members of the union. And what did I tell you? What did we talk about when the committee voted to send this out to the players' union? They ain't going to read it. Oh, there's a Cliff Notes version. Yep, there sure is. You want to know who wrote the Cliff Notes version? The guy who a complaint was filed against by Russell Okung yesterday, or 2 days ago. DeMaurice Smith. There are people within the Players Association who believe that DeMaurice Smith isn't operating within the best interest of the players. So if someone is going to create a Cliff Notes version, don't you think that Cliff Notes version is probably going to be swayed a little bit in favor of getting this vote passed? You've got to read all 476 pages. You've got 7 days to do it. I don't know if there's an audio book version of this, but you've got to do it. No, it's been extended. Okay. For slower readers, I guess, it's been extended to, I think, Saturday or Sunday that the vote has to be done by. Because it was originally, the vote had to be cast, like we were going to know tomorrow. But this has been pushed off to Saturday or Sunday. I think it's Sunday. I think Sunday we'll know whether the vote was yes or no. We'll know where this NFL CBA stands. But it cracked me up to see this. Well, because of the new information that was put out there. Man, it wasn't new information. Y'all just didn't read. Someone got a call from, I don't know, Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson, one of these other people opposing and said, hey, did you read this? Or someone got a call from Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's on the yes side of the vote. Maybe he called and said, did you vote no? Why did you vote no when you can ... fill in the blank? Because of new information. No new information has come to light. Just these players didn't read this. They didn't read the 476 pages that were sent to them. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. Yeah, a lot of times your agent will inform you of what this stuff says and why you should vote yes or why you should vote no. But ultimately, it's up to the players to read it, and they didn't. It's strange that the NFL Players Association won't let them change their vote no matter what direct. It feels like the Players Association has a sense of where the vote is going, and they don't want to change it. Whether the vote is going yes or the vote is going no. They have a sense of where it's going, and they don't want it changed. Some things that might be changing coming up are some potential rule changes. The NFL will again look at an alternative to the onside kick at this year's league meeting. In a proposal put forward by the Philadelphia Eagles, the league will consider allowing teams to, instead of kick off or try an onside kick, that the new onside kick thing would be like a 4th and 15 play. A 4th and 15 play on their own 25, if the team is able to get, 15 yards on the play, they get to keep the ball. That could be the new version of the onside kick. It's unclear how much support that proposal has. We knew when the New Orleans Saints, we don't know that it was the Saints, but we could put it together. We know when there was a proposal for changes to the pass interference review process, we knew right away that there was a lot of support for that. We don't really know what the support behind this is. I don't find the onside kick that exciting because it so rarely works. And now that there are changes to the way, like, I think you can only, the way you line up is different. Like, the onside kick, it's very, very different now, and it's going to be very, very rare that a team recovers it, or, that a team that needs to recover it does. Obviously, a team is going to recover it every time there's an onside kick. It's just not the one doing the onside kick. There's really little to no opportunity for the team desperate to get the ball back to actually get the ball back. And it takes away a certain level of excitement. I mean, there used to be this kind of hang on the edge, like, oh, what's going to happen here? Kind of hang on the edge of your seat for the onside kick. That's not there. At least not for me. It's just, I don't recall seeing one recovered last year. And maybe there was. I just don't remember seeing one. But that's one of the rule proposals that has been put out there, or that will be put out there in the upcoming league meetings. Another one is a potential sky judge. 2 NFL teams have proposed the addition of a booth umpire to each of the officiating crews for the 2020 season. One of 7 team-based rule changes the league owners will consider this season, in addition to the 4th and 15 one that I just mentioned right there. That's interesting. A sky judge. So I guess that means you have someone in the booth monitoring the game. So this is where it's tricky, right? Because you have the head of officiating, right? The guy who makes the penalty calls, does all that stuff. The older guy that looks exactly like an older Jason Ross. You've got that guy out there. You've got all of these different heads of officials. But if you're a like a sky judge, if you're in the booth and aren't you automatically the lead judge? Like, can't you automatically, like, oh, you missed this? Like, is that what a judge would do? Is that what a sky judge would do? Is you're watching from above, you're in the booth watching the monitor, and you missed this holding call, or oh, you missed this pass interference call, or nope, that wasn't a pass interference call. Wouldn't it be like basically in the last 2 minutes, the reviews come from the review studio, right? Like coaches can't challenge something. So the review process is initiated by someone within the NFL. Wouldn't this be like unless I'm misunderstanding what the sky judge does, wouldn't this be like a 60-minute version of that, where the sky judge buzzes down and says, hey, you missed this? I'm curious to hear more about this proposal. I'm curious to hear more about what it means and what it would mean for the officiating process. Because we saw a rule change last year that was a disaster for the officiating process. And that was the pass interference rule. Or I guess it's the pass interference review rule. Whatever you want to call it, it was a disaster on all fronts. It was all sorts of bad. So we have as just noted, 7 team-based rule change proposals that are going to be coming up that league owners will consider. We just gave you 2 of them. We'll dig a little deeper and see if we can find a couple of more. I do like the idea of 4th and 15, though. I do like, or specifically, I like the idea of changing where we're at with the onside kick. I very, very, very much like that idea. Sky judge, you're going to have to tell me a little bit more about that one. I'll be anxious to see like what exactly all of that means. So appreciate you as always for tuning in, man. For those who are watching on YouTube, I did this on the Hot Mic app yesterday. I'll just give you a quick tour of what's here in the studio. Many of you know Bo Jackson, one of my favorite athletes. I say my studio. It's the front room of my house, man, but come on, play along. Many of you know that Bo Jackson's one of my favorite athletes of all time. Yes, I have all sorts of paraphernalia from The Rock. A couple of my books over here. Obviously, this one is super, super special for many, many, many reasons, but I always keep this one close. My Mamba Mentality here. I don't know. I know you could see some of them, but there's a stack of 9 Office Funko Pops over here. All of these Funko Pops behind me, These are all Rock movie characters. There's the one from Moana, which I love. I watched that last night after the Celtics Pacers. Fast and Furious, G.I. Joe, which I've never seen, and Jumanji. I've still got to watch the second Jumanji. This is an autographed banner that I got at the MTV Radio Music Awards in South Beach. It was the one time I went to Miami. You can't see, but that's Hulk Hogan's autograph. If you go up a little bit further, you could see Beyonce's. Dougie Fresh is in there, Run DMC. So if you're listening on the podcast, go check out a little mini tour here. Troy Aikman autograph plaque over there. I think if I tilt the camera up just a little bit, there you go. There's Janet Jackson. That WrestleMania thing is autographed by not Mick Foley, but Cactus Jack. That is another, actually, it would be this one. That one right there is an autograph by The Rock, and it literally just says Rock. So I have like 3 or 4 different Rock autographs from different times in his career, and the evolution of his signature is fantastic. If you look over there, that is an autograph from the Macho Man Randy Savage when he became a rap star, and he came to, he showed up at studios. He arrived at the KSFM studio with DJ Cool. If I go a little bit further, that's actually an autograph of Owen Hart. I met Owen Hart and The Rock when they were both in the Nation of Domination at an on sale thing at the old Arco Arena. So there you have it. Why I wear this, I have no idea. It's freaking useless. I'm not monitoring anything. I haven't played one bit of sound, and it keeps falling out of my ear. I think like I'm a TV host or something. But appreciate you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, greatly appreciate that. But if you're listening, if you continue to support this podcast, no matter what, man, you know how much I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with me here today. Leave a comment here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the little notification alert so you know when we're live and you know when the show posts. And make sure you're back with us tomorrow. It's the Kings and the Pelicans in the latest round of playoff games for the Sacramento Kings. We'll see what happens tonight, and we will have full coverage for you tomorrow here on the podcast with Damien Barling.